All right, folks, welcome back to the Steve Malzberg Show. And joining us now, as promised, in just a second, will be Malcolm Homlein, Executive Vice Chairman and CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations. And we will get his take on the deal signed by the United States and others and Iran. And let's say hello to Malcolm. Hello, Malcolm. How are you, sir?
Good, Steve. How are you?
Good. Good to talk to you. Happy Hanukkah in advance.
And Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's pretty wild that it's the same day.
I hope you'll interview me after the next time, both Hanukkah and
Yeah, what is that going to be in 200 years?
75,000.
75,000 years.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll do it somewhere else.
Right. And I tell people, and Shimon Peres will be looking for his next job.
Very good. All right, so this deal, and let's concentrate on how would you think it affects Israel. We've heard from Benjamin Netanyahu. We've heard the administration single out Israel when it's not only Israel in the region objecting. What's going on here?
Look, this is a very complicated matter with very high stakes. We're talking about the security of the United States, our allies, the stability of the Middle East, and frankly of the world, because you're dealing with the largest sponsor of terrorism globally. You're talking about the backer of Hamas, Hezbollah. You're talking about a country that underwrites terrorism in Latin America, North America, Africa, Asia. We're talking about a country that is rapidly advancing towards a nuclear weapon, which would only make all of these activities much more severe and give them a nuclear cover for their support of terrorism, their violation of human rights, their aggressive activities, whether it's in Syria or we saw it in Iraq. We've seen it all over. And the question here is, are they doing what they have done in the past, the Iranians, and that is that they use negotiations and agreements and accords as time just to progress, that they lie and obfuscate. And the guy who told us all of this is the president of Iran, Rouhani, the guy who was just elected, who was saying is a new face in his great charm offensive. He was the negotiator in 2003 to 2007, wrote a book, told how he lied and distorted and misrepresented and mocked his interlocutors from the West. And there's no reason to believe that this whole history of this kind of conduct by Iran is not being replicated again. So that's why there is a lot of concern that there are issues that are not addressed, the whole weaponization aspect, the missile delivery system. None of this is subject to this agreement. And it leaves intact the infrastructure, all the centrifuges, the plutonium plant, everything remains in place. The UN resolutions said that it all had to be removed.
So Malcolm, it begs the question, what are the motivations here? I mean, you know, when it comes to Israel's security and when it comes to our own security, this deal stinks. So when you have a president who publicly made an effort to shake the hand of the president of Iran at the General Assembly at the United Nations, was rebuffed, nonetheless, then said, I just called him and we had a conversation and we're going to start talks, when in fact those talks reportedly had been going on for months and have now been going on for a year. You know, what are we to believe?
Well, that's part of the problem is we see already reports from Iran today where they deny the accuracy of the stuff posted by the administration in the summary of the agreement. They're saying that it's false, and they're putting up their own summary of the agreement. I think the administration and the P5+1 all had an admirable goal, and the goal is the same that Israel, Saudi Arabia, all of our allies, that's what they all want, and that is to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power. That's the goal. The question is, how do you achieve it? They feel that, look, we have 6 months for this interim agreement to prove what the Iranian intention is. During that time, they will get $6-8 billion in sanctions relief, but the sanction structure remains in place. The Iranians are saying we already got the relief, and you know that there are a lot of Europeans and companies and others who will take advantage of any breach in the sanctions regime to try to exploit it. The administration will say, look, the agreement freezes them in place. They can't increase their stockpile of 20%, 5% enriched uranium, and the 20% has to be converted to gas or other forms, even though it can be reconverted back. The complaint is that everything else stays in place. You have 19,000 centrifuges in place.
And they don't stop. They don't shut down. It's insane. Let me ask you, Malcolm, as we're talking to Malcolm Homlein, Executive Vice Chair, CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. What does Israel do? Does this preclude Israel from striking within the next 6 months? Are their hands tied? Have there been messages sent directly or otherwise to Israel from the Obama administration that we will help thwart you if you try to attack? What's going on here?
Well, the president said Israel has to do what it has to do, and I think Israel will take whatever steps it deems necessary to prevent the threat being realized that Iran wants to destroy Israel, as well as anybody else who opposes their views. I don't think the president has told them we'll thwart you. I know that they did put out a statement that the United States controls the radar in the region, so any move has to be cleared with them first. I think that the question of whether Israel can do it, yes, they can. Does this make it more complicated? I would have to say yes as well.
And how do you interpret that message that we have the radar and you have to check with us first? I mean, what does that say to you?
Well, it says that they don't want to have confusion, that we don't have any mishaps, but it's clear that the United States has made clear our position that we don't want, that the United States doesn't want Israel to do anything at this time. But I can tell you that every Arab country is praying that Israel does. And Israel and the Arabs, the people who live in the region, don't have the same luxury, the United States being so far away and having the superpower status that they can respond in very different ways than Israel, which is more limited in its capacities and is much closer to the imminency of the danger.
How close has Barack Obama brought the Saudis and the Israelis together? How close together are they?
Well, he's accomplished certainly miracles in terms of bringing unity in the world, but I wouldn't count too much on how long that lasts. But they will take advantage of the situation. But when you see Prince Alawid saying that Israel's not the problem is Iran, and you see that the Sunni-Shiite divide is really getting more and more serious there and everywhere else in the region, and this will exacerbate it.
All right. Listen, Malcolm, thank you for joining us. Really a pleasure. Always great to talk to you, my friend.
To be with you.
Take care. That's Malcolm Homlein, Executive Vice Chair, CEO of the Conference of Presidents of Major American Jewish Organizations, on the Steve Malzberg Show. When we come back, the politics of Obamacare and everything else Obama. When we return with Mary Matlin, new polls out today on trust and down, tanking. Steve Malzberg Show.